You ever get that feeling like some historical figures just kind of got lost in the shuffle? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Like their stories are there, but they just never quite make it into the spotlight.
totally.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into the life of one of those figures, Millard Fillmore,
Ah, Millard Fillmore.
the 13th president of the United States.
Right.
Now, he's often overshadowed by some of the bigger names,
Right. Sure.
the Lincolns and Jeffersons of the world.
Yeah.
But Fillmore's presidency happened right smack in the middle of a real turning point in American history.
Oh, absolutely. It's 1850. The nation is wrestling with this massive issue of slavery, and the Compromise of 1850 is about to become law. Talk about a pivotal moment.
We've got a whole stack of fascinating sources here, biographies, letters, even a podcast episode, believe it or not, that shed light on this often overlooked president.
It's amazing what you can find when you dig a little deeper, isn't it?
And what's really interesting is that Fillmore's story actually starts with a mystery, years before he even gets to the White House.
Oh, a mystery. I love a good mystery. Tell me more.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1826, and a man named William Morgan, a former Freemason, vanishes. Poof, gone.
Vanishes. Just like that.
Well, not exactly just like that. Witnesses claimed he was forced into a carriage shouting, "Murder! Murder!"
Whoa, that's creepy.
Right. And the whole thing just ignited a firestorm of controversy, suspicion, you name it, fueled this wave of anti-Masonic feeling all across the country.
So it's like something straight out of a thriller novel. And this event, this vanishing act, actually had a direct impact on Fillmore's early political career.
You got it.
Yeah.
The outrage over Morgan's disappearance gave rise to the Anti-Masonic Party, the first third party in American history, by the way.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And guess who got his start in politics with that very party?
I'm going to guess Millard Fillmore.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. He later switched over to the Whig Party, but his early involvement with the anti-Masons shows he wasn't afraid to, dive into these really controversial issues.
He definitely wasn't shying away from a challenge. So we're already seeing a glimpse of the complexities that would come to define Fillmore's presidency. He's drawn to these politically charged movements, but how does this early experience shape his approach to, well, the even bigger challenge of slavery?
That's where we see the contradictions in Fillmore's character really come into play. He was a self-made man, pulled himself up from poverty, became a champion of education.
A real rags to riches story. Inspiring, even.
Right. But at the same time, he also held some pretty racist views, which unfortunately weren't uncommon for the time.
Right, the complexities of the era.
Exactly. So he detested slavery on a personal level, but he believed it was protected by the Constitution, and this led him to support its expansion. It's like,
Yeah, I see what you mean. It seems like a real moral tightrope walk, trying to reconcile those beliefs. It really underscores how deeply entrenched slavery was in the fabric of American society at that time.
you hit the nail on the head. While we might judge Fillmore's views by today's standards, we have to try to understand him within the context of his time. Now fast forward to 1850, and Fillmore finds himself thrust into the presidency after the sudden death of President Zachary Taylor.
Oh, wow. Talk about being thrown into the deep end.
Right. He inherits this deeply divided nation, grappling with the question that's threatening to tear it apart. Will slavery be allowed in the new territories acquired after the Mexican-American War?
The stakes couldn't be higher. And this is where the Compromise of 1850 takes center stage, right?
Precisely. A series of bills cobbled together, to try and appease both sides of this incredibly volatile debate.
A political balancing act, for sure.
Okay, so let's break down these bills a bit. What were the key elements of this compromise, and how did they attempt to address this looming issue of slavery?
Well, one of the biggest things was that California entered the Union as a free state, which, of course, pleased the North. But to appease the South, the compromise allowed for the potential expansion of slavery into the territories of Utah and New Mexico. They used this concept of popular sovereignty, which basically left it up to the residents of those territories to decide whether or not to allow slavery.
So, a bit of a mixed bag there, trying to please everyone. But as they say, you can't please all of the people all of the time. What else was included in this grand bargain?
Well, they also included a ban on the slave trade in Washington, D.C., which was a symbolic victory for abolitionists.
Symbolic, but still a win.
Right. But then there's the most controversial element, and the one that really throws a wrench into things, the Fugitive Slave Act.
Ah, yes, the Fugitive Slave Act.
Yeah.
This one really ramped up the tension. It basically forced citizens, even in free states, to assist in capturing runaway slaves.
Imagine the moral dilemma that presented for people who oppose slavery.
Talk about a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. This act made it a federal crime to help runaway slaves, and it empowered slave catchers to pursue fugitives into free states. This not only inflamed the debate over slavery, but also led to free black people being wrongfully captured and sent back into slavery.
It's heartbreaking to think about, and this is where Fillmore's support for this act becomes particularly perplexing. He personally disliked slavery, but he urged Americans to enforce this law. How do you reconcile those two things?
His reasoning seemed to stem from this deep belief that the compromise, even with its flawed elements, was the only way to prevent the nation from fracturing.
So, he saw it as a necessary evil, a way to hold the country together, even if it meant upholding a system he found morally repugnant. What an incredibly difficult position to be in. It's almost like he felt trapped between his personal convictions and this duty to preserve the Union.
And that's what makes Fillmore such a fascinating figure. He's grappling with these enormous moral and political challenges, trying to navigate a path through a storm that's threatening to engulf the nation. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what might have happened if he had the space,
Space for what?
to focus on other aspects of his presidency? It's just with all this drama, with the compromise unfolding.
Right, right.
Fillmore is also, well, he's making some really interesting moves on the international stage.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to forget about that part, isn't it?
Totally.
You get so caught up in the domestic turmoil.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned earlier, you said he sent a naval expedition to Japan.
Yep.
That seems pretty bold for the time,
Uh-huh.
especially considering Japan was, largely isolated from the West, right?
It really is. And what's so intriguing is how this connects to Fillmore's vision,
His vision.
for America's role in
Huh.
the world.
Yeah.
He really saw the Pacific as this key area
Key area.
for expanding American influence
Uh-huh.
and trade, of course.
Mhm.
And this whole drive to engage with Japan, it wasn't just about economic gain. No, it was also strategic.
Strategic? How so?
Think about it. This is the age of steamships, right?
Right.
And those ships, well, they needed coaling stations
Coaling station.
to refuel on those long voyages.
Ah, so establishing a relationship with Japan was like
Exactly.
securing a strategic foothold?
In the Pacific, a stepping stone to those vast markets in China.
Wow, okay, I see. That's a side of Fillmore,
Yeah,
that often gets overlooked.
it really does. He was a pragmatist,
A pragmatist.
very focused on securing, America's long-term interests
Mm-hmm.
in a rapidly changing world. And this pragmatism,
Yes.
it's evident in his approach to the situation with Hawaii, too.
Ah, yes. Hawaii. Still an independent kingdom then, right?
Mhm.
But obviously the U.S. had their eye on those islands. Strategically important.
Yeah.
What was Fillmore's role in all that?
Well, he was a key player in pushing for a treaty with Hawaii.
A treaty, huh?
He saw the islands as vital
Vital. How so?
to American interests in the Pacific, both for trade and, well, potentially as a naval base.
Uh-huh.
And during his presidency, they finally signed a treaty. It had been in the works for years.
Interesting.
Strengthened the relationship for sure.
So while he's dealing with this firestorm over slavery, trying to hold the country together,
Yeah.
Fillmore's also laying the groundwork for America's future as a Pacific power. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. It makes you think about how interconnected history is. You've got domestic politics,
Foreign policy
economic interests, all playing out.
on this grand stage,
Exactly. And in the middle of it all
Mhm.
is Millard Fillmore.
trying to make sense of it all,
Mhm.
guide the nation through these turbulent times.
It makes you wonder about the man behind the policies, what kind of personality did he have?
Yeah, good question. Was he a charismatic leader, a backroom strategist, something else entirely?
From what we've got, the sources, he comes across as a bit of an enigma, actually. He's often described as, well, reserved,
Reserved, huh?
even melancholic, Not exactly what we usually picture when we think of a president.
Not the stereotypical glad-handing politician.
Not at all. It seems his personality was really shaped by his upbringing. Remember, he came from a poor, rural background, had to work incredibly hard for everything he achieved.
Right, right. So he was known for his, attention to detail.
Meticulous, yes. Cautious approach to decision-making, deep sense of responsibility.
Sounds more like he was at home, poring over legal documents than giving rousing speeches.
That's a good way to put it. He wasn't a natural showman, but he was deeply principled, believed in serving his country to the best visibility.
And yet, despite all that, despite his best efforts, it feels like his presidency is bookended by this turmoil. Takes office after Taylor's sudden death. Then his term ends with the Whig Party fracturing over slavery. It almost feels like, I don't know, like he was destined to be this tragic figure.
It does make you wonder if he ever felt like he was swimming against the tide.
Yeah.
The nation was so deeply divided, and those forces pulling it apart.
They were only getting stronger.
And Fillmore.
Tried to steer a middle course, sought compromise, wanted unity, but ultimately, the tide of history, well, it was against him.
It's like he's standing at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Trying to hold back this storm, but knowing deep down that the storm's going to win.
And maybe that's the most enduring image of Millard Fillmore, a man grappling with the weight of history, striving for peace and unity.
In a world
On the brink of chaos.
Just a powerful image, a reminder that sometimes even the best intentions aren't enough.
To change the course of events, yeah.
The decisions made by these seemingly ordinary men, they can have extraordinary consequences.
That's precisely why it's so important to delve into these narratives. They give us a glimpse,
Into.
the complexities of leadership, the challenges of governance, the impact of choices made in the past, the enduring impact.
So where does all this leave Fillmore's legacy? Is he just a forgotten president, a tragic figure, or something else entirely? That's the question historians are still debating, Some see him as weak, indecisive, a leader who failed to rise to the occasion. Others view him as a man who, well, did his best in impossible circumstances, a tragic figure caught in the crossfire.
It's a fascinating debate.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the power of history, to challenge our assumptions.
To make us reconsider the past.
But before we wrap up our deep dive into Millard Fillmore, there's one more chapter in his life we need to explore. His post-presidency years. What happened to this once powerful man after he left the White House?
Fillmore's life after the presidency, it's fascinating. A study in contrast, really. He returned to Buffalo, New York, remained a prominent citizen, but he also faced some, personal tragedies and political setbacks, too.
So he goes from the center stage of American politics back to this quieter life.
Yeah.
But not without some drama along the way.
Exactly. Tragically, both his wife and daughter died shortly after he left office.
Oh, wow.
This really affected him, and he spent a lot of time traveling. In the U.S. abroad, too. He even met Queen Victoria.
No kidding.
She was reportedly quite impressed with him.
It's hard to imagine,
What?
a former U.S. president becoming like a socialite.
I don't know, right? But even presidents need time to grieve, to find solace after such a loss.
Of course. It speaks to the human side of Fillmore, the man behind the political facade. But even as he was seeking solace, it seems like he couldn't completely escape the pull of politics.
That's right.
So did he attempt to come back?
He did, but not with the Whigs.
Not the Whigs.
Nope. Remember, they were fractured over slavery, eventually dissolved. Fillmore actually ran for president again in 1856.
He did.
This time as the candidate for the American Party.
The American Party.
Also known as the Know-Nothing Party.
Ah, the Know-Nothings. Fascinating bunch. And a little controversial, weren't they?
They were a nativist movement, primarily concerned with limiting immigration and the influence of Catholics.
So Fillmore, who spent his presidency trying to hold the nation together, aligns himself with a party that's promoting division and exclusion.
It is quite a shift. It speaks to the changing political landscape, though.
How so?
The issue of slavery, it was fracturing the old party system.
Right.
New movements were emerging, driven by anxieties about social change and immigration.
And how did Fillmore fare in his bid for a second term?
He didn't win, came in a distant third.
Oh, wow.
Behind the Democrat, James Buchanan, and the Republican, John C. Fremont.
So the man who was once at the helm of a nation on the brink of civil war, ends his political career as the candidate for a party many saw as fringe and divisive. It's ironic, isn't it?
It is, and it makes you think about how we should remember Millard Fillmore. Was he a failure, or was he a product of his time, doing the best he could?
It's a debate that's probably not going away anytime soon. But one thing's for sure, Millard Fillmore's story. It's a reminder that history is rarely simple.
Or straightforward.
It's a tapestry.
Woven with contradictions, complexities, and unintended consequences.
And it's by exploring those complexities, those nuances,
Yeah.
that we gain a deeper understanding of our past
Yeah.
and its impact on the present.
Well said. But before we completely wrap up, our deep dive into Millard Fillmore's life,
Yes.
there's this fascinating tidbit. I just have to share it. Remember that mystery?
The mystery.
The disappearance of William Morgan?
Ah, yes. The incident that sparked the anti-Masonic movement and launched Fillmore's political career.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Years after Fillmore left office, he actually joined a secret society himself,
He did?
the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, closely associated with the Know-Nothings.
You're kidding me. The
I-
man who started his political journey with the anti-Masons ended up joining a secret society. Talk about a full circle moment.
It's almost too perfect, isn't it? And it just shows that even in history, truth can be stranger than fiction. But we'll leave that thought with you, our listeners.
What do you make of Fillmore's late-in-life embrace of secrecy? Does it change how you see him? Or does it just add another layer to this already complex and enigmatic figure?
It's a twist worthy of a deep dive all its own, but for now, we'll let you ponder that.
It's amazing,
What is?
how a single life can hold so much history, so much contradiction.
It really is remarkable.
As we're wrapping up our deep dive into Millard Fillmore, what stands out to you? Like, what's his most defining characteristic?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's hard to choose just one.
Right.
But I think what makes Fillmore so intriguing is how he embodied the anxieties
The anxiety.
and aspirations of a nation on the brink of this massive transformation. Here's this man, rises from poverty to the highest office, a champion of education, of self-improvement, yet so deeply entangled in the web of his era's, racial and social prejudices.
It's like he's this walking paradox, isn't he?
In a way, yeah.
Striving for unity while upholding a system that was inherently divisive.
Mm-hmm.
And then achieving these significant strides in foreign policy, while grappling with an issue that would ultimately tear the nation apart.
Exactly. His efforts to open trade with Japan, to secure that treaty with Hawaii, they demonstrate this forward-thinking vision for America's role on the world stage. These were bold moves.
Bold moves.
That have had, lasting repercussions on America's global standing.
It's almost like he had one foot in the past and one in the future,
Yeah.
trying to reconcile these competing forces. And it makes you wonder, how different his legacy might be if the issue of slavery hadn't so completely dominated his presidency.
It's a question historians still grapple with. What if Fillmore had had the time, the space, to fully pursue his vision for America's global role?
Wow.
How would things have unfolded differently? It's a good reminder, I think, that history isn't just this linear progression of events,
Right.
but this complex tapestry of choices, circumstances, and unintended consequences.
Absolutely. But even as we acknowledge his accomplishments, we can't shy away from the more troubling aspects of his legacy, particularly his support for the Fugitive Slave Act.
You're right. We can try to understand, historical figures within their context.
Of course.
But we have to also grapple with the moral implications of their actions. The Fugitive Slave Act, it was a deeply unjust law. It inflicted immense suffering. We can't lose sight of that.
It's a stark reminder. Even well-intentioned leaders can make decisions with devastating consequences. And it really underscores the importance of, critically examining the actions of those in power.
Past and present, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. It's by engaging with these complexities, by acknowledging the nuances and contradictions of history, that we become more informed, more engaged citizens.
Well said. So, as we bring our deep dive into Millard Fillmore to a close,
Yes.
what final thought would you leave our listeners with?
Oh, that's a good one.
I think it's this: Millard Fillmore, for all his contradictions, his complexities, he's a reflection of the nation he led. His story challenges us to look beyond the simple narratives of history, to grapple with the messy realities of the past.
It reminds us that history isn't just a collection of statues and textbooks,
Right.
but a living, breathing tapestry of human experiences, triumphs, and failures.
And perhaps, by understanding figures like Millard Fillmore, with all their flaws and all their achievements, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we inhabit today.
Beautifully put. And that's the power of taking a deep dive, isn't it?
It is.
To uncover those hidden layers of the past and connect them to our present.
Exactly. And it's a journey that's well worth taking.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Millard Fillmore's life and legacy. We hope you've gained some new insights and perspectives along the way. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
See you in the next deep dive.